research that I did a couple of years ago about Prosopis, and my thesis is titled "Determining the Current and Potential Extent of the Prosopis Invasion in East Africa." And we don't have a lot of time, so I will try to tailor this a bit to what you want. So yeah, let me first introduce Prosopis a little bit. So Prosopis is a species originating from Central and South America, and it was introduced into many parts of the world for restoring pastoral lands, providing fuel wood and fodder. So of course, climate change is a big influence here. And these things were caused by overgrazing and prolonged droughts, and also some displacements due to conflict. So you would have, say, a refugee camp, which causes abundant stress on the environment. So as you can see in these pictures here, A and B. So B is the refugee camp, A is, yeah, in general, droughts and maybe a bit of overgrazing. So because of that, FAO established a number of plantations in many parts of the world, and there they tested with different species of Prosopis to see which one would hold and provide an answer for these problems. So what happened here is you see just a list of all the different subspecies of Prosopis, and the green pixels here are the native range, and the red ones here are the invaded ones. So this is a bit of an older map that I used. So at the moment, there's other areas where Prosopis also is present or is invasive. And what the takeaway here is that mainly 4 species thrived, which were Prosopis glandulosa, Prosopis chilensis, Prosopis uliflora, and Prosopis pallida. And there was a hypothesis that these 4 species were hybridizing, so they created a new species which would be like very, very invasive. And I think in recent years, and through contact with my colleagues, this now has been disproved. I'm not sure if it's already published, but people are kind of going away from this hybridization hypothesis. Then I would like to maybe dive a bit into why Prosopis is so invasive. So they have a bunch of really good characteristics for plants that can thrive in arid environments. So Prosopis produces a large number of seeds, and they will remain viable in the seed bank for many decades. So once you put Prosopis, it will always come back if the seeds are there. The species has a rapid growth rate. The species copies after damage. That means if you cut a tree from the stump, several smaller trees or a bush will grow. The root system is also quite remarkable. So it has a very deep taproot, so it can reach the groundwater level, even where other species cannot. So it's better adapted for dry climates. So yeah, so it's also tolerant to climate extremes, hence the taproot. It's also tolerant to various types of soils. So we found soils with high salinity, and Prosopis was thriving there. And the last point is the negative allopathic effects on competing plants. So that means that underneath a dense Prosopis cover, you will not really find any other species thriving. So they outcompete the other species. Maybe having a look at the strategy. So what we have noticed is that Prosopis spreads its seeds through hydrochorus and endozoochorus dispersal mechanisms. So the first one means that if Prosopis grows next to a water source or a river, the seeds would fall off and the water will distribute them along the shores and the river banks. And the second one, so you see that in picture E, so that's like a dry riverbed, and all the vegetation here in the foreground, that's all Prosopis. Then the endozoochorus dispersal mechanism is through the, so animals would eat the seeds, they will digest it, but the seed survives and then deposit it elsewhere. And I think a good example here is picture A, so you have some manure and all these little seedlings, that's all Prosopis growing from there. What we noticed then in the next point is that Prosopis initially colonizes riparian zones, so areas near water, because it can then take advantage of the deep soils, the fertile soils, and the abundance of water. And we also noticed that disturbed lands and abandoned and low input farmland was also highly susceptible for invasions. So that you see in picture B and C. So here you have a fallow farmland, and the plant in the middle is a young Prosopis plant, and the same with C. So the brown soil is like a fallow field, and everything surrounded there is Prosopis. And the last point, then in later stages, also porous soils, grasslands and rangelands can be invaded, and that's an example of picture D. So that's what we determined from the literature and some observations. And the objective of my thesis was to determine the current distribution of Prosopis. And here we used Earth observation methods. So we tested 3 different sensors. We tested different classifiers, so looking into the methodology, what works best. And then also we looked at the temporal window to increase the mapping accuracy. So these 3 main objectives were there to determine if we could find the current distribution of Prosopis. Then the second one is determining the potential distribution. So here we would assess different environmental variables and species distribution modeling. And maybe for your interest, I kind of will skip point 2 here because maybe not that relevant. And the last point is some implications and recommendations. So then going into the study areas. So the first ones were in Somaliland or Somalia. So there were 2 study areas. Then we had 3 study areas in Kenya. So we had 2 in Turkana, and then 1 in Baringo in Marigat. And then we also contributed a bit to studies in Ethiopia and did some research in Tanzania as well. So all of these countries have Prosopis present. The first thing that we did is field work. So we went into the field, we had the GPS devices, collected tracks and points, and made observations about the different land covers. Then we had a look at the Prosopis. We determined the cover, so how dense it was growing, and tried to determine the age. So we had local people around us, and they were helping us to determine like how long this has been here and how fast this is changing. We had a look at the distance from water sources, and then we took some spectral measurements, and that's what you can see in the picture in the middle. So I am on a ladder with this heavy backpack, and I'm collecting information. So this is the spectral signature you see here on the left. So it's the sun bouncing off the leaves of the plant, and this sensor here captures it, and it shows you a unique signature of Prosopis, which is the one in orange, and the green one is the one from an acacia species. So you see there's some differences, but they are very similar. And this is then also a basis for the remote sensing, for the Earth observation, because in the next slide, you'll see the 3 different satellites that we used, and they all collect information in this signature in the spectral range. So here we have Landsat, Sentinel-2, and Pleiad. And we used those 3 sensors. Landsat is the coarsest spatial resolution, so it's at 30 meters and has 8 spectral bands. We have Sentinel at 10 or 20 meters with 12 bands, and Pleiades has 0.5 meter to 2 meters spatial resolution, but only 4 or 5 bands. And examples here are, you can see below. So on the left you have Landsat, in the middle Sentinel, on the right Pleiad. And you really see the sharpness and the information that you can get from those different sensors, being Landsat being quite coarse and Pleiades having a lot of detail in there. One slide about the classifiers. So to determine the different land cover types and Prosopis, we set a baseline by using a simple maximum likelihood classifier. And then for the remainder of the studies, we used random forest. So I was lucky that within the unit I was working, there was a lot of knowledge about machine learning. So I was able to learn this and apply this. So the benefits are it's an ensemble model which uses decision trees, which you see here on the figure on the right. It automatically generates an out-of-bag accuracy, so it's a way to assess the accuracy of the model, and it doesn't make any assumptions about the distribution. Then going a little bit deeper, we applied random forest in two approaches. So there's a pixel-based approach and an object-based approach. A pixel-based approach just uses a single pixel, the different bands, so the spectral information. So if it's Sentinel, it's 12 bands. So it's fast, and we noticed there's a bias in the accuracy. The object-based approach, you use additional steps. It's a longer process. So we used a large-scale mean shift, which is a segmentation algorithm. You grow regions, you have a lot more information because a region compromises of 10 pixels, 100 pixels. So you can generate features, statistical information, which you can feed into the machine learning model. You can do feature ranking, and in general, you can achieve higher accuracies. For the validation, so we use the out of the box, the OOB validation. Then we had the mean decrease in accuracy, the independent validation data sets that sometimes we're able to collect. And mainly we used the k-fold cross-validation or the block cross-validation. And these are really useful when you don't have a lot of reference data. So you spend weeks in the field, but you never have enough training data. So here you split up your reference data sets in training validation, repeat this with different subsets to get a more accurate estimation of your accuracy. So based on that, we made confusion matrices and then derived parameters like overall accuracy, user producer accuracy, kappa, and so forth. These are the results. I don't really want to linger too much on this, but these are 6 papers that were published in the different areas. And you see that they have, so in the columns, different classifiers. So mainly random forest, but it's different pixel or object-based approaches. The third column has the different data sets that we use. So the first ones were really focusing on Landsat. Then when Sentinel became more available, we switched to Sentinel, and in the end we have a Pleiades study. That also influences the amount of classes that we used. And then the last column, we have the validation strategy. So sometimes we mention the amount of points, but maybe good to see is the overall accuracy that ranges from here 76 to 96% over all the different studies. But that's really influenced by what if you use object-based or pixel-based approaches and so forth, and also the validation strategy. Then the maps. So here you have the left map is in the Turkana area. The upper map is Somaliland, Hargeisa, and then the central one is in Lake Baringo. So here we consolidated our results, redistributed the classes or consolidated the classes. So we ended up with a dense Prosopis class in red, a sparse Prosopis class in orange, a mixed class in yellow, which is mixed with other vegetations or soil, and then a natural vegetation class in green, and then an other, which is all the rest. So in the table below, the first 3 columns are the hectares of the area that they cover within their respective study area. But maybe a bit more important is the percentage of it. So here we see, we should, I guess, focus on Lake Baringo. So that's the last column here. Here we see that 2.7% is densely covered with Prosopis, 8.3 or 8.4% has a sparse Prosopis cover, so it's the central map here. And we have a mixed Prosopis cover of 3.5%. So that's also, yeah, kind of in line, but of course we don't have that much to compare it with. But I guess, yeah, map C here, that will be the one most of interest. Some observations that we made is that Prosopis was mainly found near water bodies, near built-up areas, and agricultural areas. And you can always interrupt me if I'm running out of time, Kenneth. So I have a couple more slides. So the species distribution models I will skip because I think it's maybe a bit not within the target here. And I can go towards maybe my general conclusions. So what we concluded is, so indeed large areas in our study areas have been invaded by Prosopis. We found that Sentinel-2 provided very high accuracy, so good results, especially compared to Landsat. It didn't reach the accuracy of Pleiades, but Pleiades is a commercial satellite, so it's quite expensive to get that data. We noticed that Random Forest performs well, so it provides reliable and good accuracy. And then this object-based approach using the segmentation, it works well, but it's limited to the spatial resolution of the sensor. So on Pleiades, it works really well. On Landsat, it doesn't really work. And I would say Sentinel-2 is somewhere in the middle. So it can go either way. And the last point here is that the dry season data is really essential. So collecting your satellite data acquired in the dry season will yield higher accuracy or better results. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for your attention and feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you very much, Tim, for this great presentation. And I think from the users, what I could get is that they wanted to capture all the slides. And if it's possible, you can share a PDF version of this.
Of course.
It would really inspire many of us who are not able to join, but some are here. So we welcome any questions, especially from Brian or Gus or Stella. Please feel free.
I guess I'll go first. You noted that Prosopis doesn't currently occupy its entire ecological niche. Is it expected to expand into that? Or you were talking about some of the fears of a hybridized species that and that had been kind of disproved. Is it expected to continue expanding until it reaches its entire ecological niche, or is it kind of contained to opportunistic environments like flooding areas?
Thank you, Brian. That's not clear to me as well. So what we noticed is that it's very abundant near water villages, these kind of things. In the modeling part, we saw that it can potentially occupy a lot more land. But I think the driving factor is disturbance of the land. So if a natural vegetation is heavily subjected to human use, grazing, logging, charcoal production, so forth, there's a really good opportunity that there's let's say a goat or a cow who ate Prosopis seeds. He will make a little deposit, and before you know it, you also have Prosopis there because there's an opportunity, there's disturbed land. Will it occupy its full niche? That's hard to say. I think as long as there's like a healthy natural vegetation, it will have a much harder time to occupy this niche.
Yes, next question. I think I had Bako or Dr. Kilibugi. Yes, Dr. Kilibugi, please.
Okay, yes. Yeah, this is, thank you so much for this interesting presentation. And we actually have this problem, is a problem in Botswana, this invasive species Prosopis. It's actually in the desert environment. And I was quite curious when you say it's next to the water, mainly found near water bodies, but in our case, it's in the sand dunes. It was actually introduced by, I think it was the Department of Forestry and Range Resources in Botswana for the purpose of stabilizing the sand dunes. That was, I don't know, prehistoric, a long time ago. So now it is a problem. So we now, it will be interesting actually to know the spread of it, how it is actually spread, because it is actually now propagating like naturally, like he has mentioned, but in the desert area where there's not much vegetation to compete with. So I'm just wondering, yeah, and now our problem is that now we want to control the spread of this species into other areas, not necessarily in the sand dune, but in other areas in our country. So it will be interesting to map it like he has done, and then probably then we can know how to actually address the problem of controlling it, because it's a real problem. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your observation. I have to say that I heard about Prosopis being present in Botswana. I was there once, but did not find it, but I was for a course. But I've seen a lot of publications from South Africa, which is more or less in the same region. And unfortunately in Botswana, I did not find any publications or information about or maps where I could find Prosopis, but it's a really interesting observation that it's mainly appearing in sand dunes. And as you say, if it's for yeah, like stopping the movement of sand dunes, it absolutely makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. I think also a quick win from your research will be if you can use some of those spectral signatures to look at Botswana as maybe a way around it, because then we don't know where exactly it is, but Kilobogi has a feeling of some areas that she's working closely with some people in government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually, he's right. There's no much information in terms of mapping, so it will be actually very good to know the land cover aspect of it. I know where it is. I actually, yeah, there's a place next to me where, like 300 kilometers from where I am, and that's where you find it.
So that would be nice if we could talk with Tim to share some of the spectral signatures. And just to give you a context, Kelaboge Mufundizi is based in Botswana, Gaborone, and sometimes she has a research center which is like 1,000 kilometers in the north, just in the Kovango Delta area, which could be maybe an explanation of where it's seen around those areas and in the Kalahari Desert. Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. Is there any question for Tim? I know.
Yes.
Yes, please. Steve Corrid.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. That was a very good, nice presentation. My question would be on the classification part of it. I understand that you showed us the spectral signature of those. You showed us the spectral signature. So my question would be, did you just use the spectral signature and a composite imagery, or did you use a time series data to use the phenology of that Prosopis to do the classification? Mm-hmm. And would it increase the accuracy if you use the phenology, or what would it look like? Thank you.
So the spectral signature that you see here, we use this as kind of a supplementary source of information. So we were not sure if we could distinguish a native acacia tree from a Prosopis tree. So this was used to determine in which ranges what the satellites can capture. So here you have the near infrared, for example. If there's actually, we can distinguish the two species. So I think my colleagues from the JRC published this graphs, and other than that, we didn't really use them. So so what we determined here is that in the near infrared, and especially for Sentinel-2, who has more bands, that there was an opportunity. In that range to discriminate the two species. Sorry. Is that enough for as an answer, or?
So just to clarify on that, did you just use a composite imagery, or just a single image, or did you use a time series data?
Sorry, we used the single images. Yeah.
Single images. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Tim, my question was similar. Those graphs look very, very much like each other. So are there enough points in the bands covered by Sentinel-2 to actually distinguish between Prosopis and Acacia?
So yeah, here they are enough. Yeah, here the thing is, like, when we took these signatures, this was it wasn't a dry season, so both species had leaves. Then they look very similar. When you go into when it's dry in February, then you kind of avoid that whole thing, because if you have a data set from there, the Acacia species will have not that signature anymore, because the leaves are either gone or yeah.
Then I think maybe one barrier you might have met is the cloud cover. So you must have looked at scenes which were good.
Yes, we manually went to the archive, selected the dates that are suitable. Yeah. And yeah, in the end, you end up with not too much data, but you make do. So
Yes,
there is
Brian.
a question in the chat.
Yep.
Just by the way.
It's about the suitability model applied. A question from Phoebe. She's calling from Afrigist in Nigeria.
Okay, so let's see if I can find the chat. Otherwise, you can read it to me. That would be even better.
You probably have to, when you're presenting, I think it's like you have to show the options up at the top, I believe. But
yeah. Okay, now I see it.
Yes.
It's weird. No, I don't see it. It's more.
Maybe not. It's a speech bubble. I can just read it. Hi, Tim. Awesome presentation. I missed some slides, but how was the habitat suitability model developed?
Let me go to that slide. So the habitat suitability model is based on three species distribution models. So we did an ensemble approach, because we wanted to have a bit more of a robust method. So we used 30 different variables. So we used our knowledge that we saw, our experience from the field, and then some environmental variables. So what we noticed is many species distribution models, they just use a satellite data set and then these bioclimatic variables. And you end up with something that actually looks a lot like the current distribution. It's like a land cover map. And we tried to not use any satellite data and focused on so data derived from a DEM, so elevation, aspect, slope. We used a data set with all the different water bodies and rivers. So then we calculated distance from that. The same with roads. We used soil information, soil classes, lithology, landform, and then chirps and thumbsat. And that was then used to train those four different methods. So a logistic regression, maximum entropy, a random forest again, and Bayesian networks. And then these results were combined into one map. So here you see the four different results. And I have to say that maximum entropy looks quite different. The other ones, they have a bit more agreement. And these were then combined to one habitat model or map.
So mine again is to thank you very much, Tim. And if you could share the PDF, I'll share with the guys. And also this gives us an opportunity to work on some of the work we have, since we already have a platform. And also, just for your information, is also Tim is part of this organization in Austria, where he's also working on other data cubes in the world. So he's very happy to be here with us as well. And also he understands the data cube technology, and he's been working on other things as well. And also, I think if your professor was around, Tim, he would say this is very good work that you're sharing with other people who can actually be inspired very much to follow up on the work, and also to cite your work, just as Brian and Oguz met your work online and were able to develop the story. And we are thinking also to connect with you maybe further to help our colleague in Baringo, where they were moving some giraffes. And also us to say also the weeds in Africa sometimes can be an asset. sometimes they can be a menace, because in this case of Baringo, we had the situation where during the floods, it's when we realize it's a problem, but when the weather is okay, there's no much spread. So it's a very good question of how we can relate with other weather data and information, and how we can actually do much more together. So we are very grateful, team, and if you wish to stay around, there'll be a small presentation by my colleagues from EMA. This will be Brian or John?
Actually, Kenneth, I think they indicated last week that we wouldn't be able to do a presentation today.
Which is okay. At least it gives us more time to interact with team in case there's anyone with any question. And also, thank you also, team, for making time. Do you have maybe a few minutes to receive any question from the team?
Absolutely, no problem. It's my pleasure, and I still have 25 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay. So Brian, I think I see a big question in your mind.
You're correct.
Yes.
I had a question of the increasing resolution. Since you, I guess I have two-part question. You studied multiple areas, and I was kind of wondering how those different areas were chosen. And then the second was with the increasing resolution going from Landsat to Sentinel to the Pleiades. Besides maybe some like accuracy, like with the areas, was there any other improvement that you saw between the satellites? Or because I was noticing that it seemed like there was a large performance jump from Landsat to Sentinel, but from the Sentinel to Pleiades, it was about the same. I may be wrong in that, but
Okay, thank you for your question. So yeah, going to the areas. So I think these were mainly determined by my supervisor at that time. So we had a collaboration with FAO, and they had when I came in, a field campaign starting in Somaliland. So they were focusing on that area. So there's someone at the door. They can call back. So yeah, that's how we determined them. And when it comes to Baringo, also my supervisor, Clement Atzberger, he already had some research established there. And I think it was through some of the universities and these woody wheat projects that we determined, okay, these areas we really want to focus on. Then about the resolution. So yes, indeed, I would agree that Sentinel improves the results compared to Landsat. When it comes to Pleiades, yeah, I think ideally, yeah, it's very nice to have that high resolution data. You have to deal a lot with, I think, mixed classes because of, yeah, if you if you use the panchromatic band and pan sharpen it to 0.5 meter, you're not really end up in mixed vegetation. So Landsat, you're going to detect a lot of pixels where you have, I don't know, 50% Prosopis, 50% Acacia, because you cannot delineate the tree. Right. In Sentinel, you are kind of on the border. You still have a lot of mixed, but the bigger like trees you can find, and in Pleiades, you will see every individual. So that's a big bonus, of course, and an opportunity. But then, of course, the data set becomes very large and expensive.
Right.
Thank you, Tim. Maybe we can just give you 1 minute to respond to the call on the door, please. It could be very important.
I'm sorry, come again, to what?
We can give you at least 1 or 2 minutes to respond to the call on the door as we wait.
I think this person is already gone.
Okay,
if it's a postman, they wait 30 seconds. And
Okay. So sorry for that.
No
Anyone
problem.
with any question for Tim?
Yes,
so that it doesn't
I have a question.
Yes, please.
The spectral signature, were you using a handheld for those 3 graphs? Were you using a handheld equipment to record prior to using that for training purposes?
Yes, so it was called an ASD. That's the company, and we had this older model of a spectroscope. So that was owned by the institute in Vienna where I was working at the time, and I had to fly with it to Kenya and to Tanzania a couple of times, which is always a bit challenging because you need to take this as a carry-on luggage on the plane with this huge backpack, and it's quite heavy. But we also have a newer model which is much more portable. So it's a small little device that you can just hold in your hand. And I think there's different solutions on the market, and I know that sometimes it's an issue to get that equipment into remote areas.
So thank you very much, Tim. I think the logistics of traveling in equipment also means maybe you have to talk to customs to
Yes.
Yep.
Just a second, I'll be right back.
No problem, no problem. So Eric, also you mentioned you had Upuntia in Laikipia. This is also something interesting that in case you have an audio, you can let us know about the work, if you're able to do that. But if you're not able, I think I can share the links with the people in the call. And anyone else with a question as we wait for the professor to come back? So our professor is back. So in case you have any question or comments or feedback, please share with us. Otherwise, it should not be like a PhD defense. It's just a room where we are actually getting more ideas on how to improve our work. And also looking at Brian, I think he has another question. Do you think we can use the Sentinel GeoMod?
Oh, me? Possibly, because the GeoMad is the mean absolute deviation. So in the MAD product, we've taken a geometric median of, of course, the entire continent, and then looked at the mean deviation. And there's three different types of. So when I was in previous sessions, we've talked about kind of visualizing pixels in kind of a higher dimensional space, like if you were thinking in three-dimensional space, if you had red, green, and blue. And there's a couple of different ways to calculate this distance. And so there are three different mean absolute deviation products. And because of the change in the greenness, it might actually be interesting to look at and it's based on Sentinel-2, the mean absolute deviation. And one of those might actually be able to be helpful in seeing there's that the areas with larger deviation, especially kind of in the green dimension, would it would be something I would want to try. Like I'm just kind of brainstorming here. For the mean absolute deviation would be higher because of the greening and the senescence for the natural vegetation, whereas Prosopis seems to stay green all year round. There was also a comment about I think we call that here in Texas prickly pear. Is our local name for it. Tim, do you think these technique, like this kind of the outline of the technique? I know there was the idea of the ensemble, which looked like a lot of work both in the modeling category, and then of course there's a lot of data collection in the field. But if somebody else was facing a similar, do you think it's generalizable, the kind of approach of going out, taking samples in the field, and with the spectrum, or do you think it kind of heavily relied on this idea of having kind of a different life cycle? If you could expand on that, maybe.
I think that's collecting the spectral profiles is totally optional, and
Okay.
we did it just out of interest and see if there's any opportunities, if there's like a really big difference in a certain range. So I would not really apply that on many different areas. So the general approach, I think you can apply all over Africa. It's just a point of having good reference data. So having reliable and enough observations of where Prosopis is, then you should be able to perform a similar classification. The Sentinel data is free. All the software, the models, that's also, I think, quite well documented and available. So it's just finding the reference data. That's the bottleneck, I think.
I think Eric had a point of Opuntia stricta, a type of cactus, I believe, and whether this is applicable to that. I guess it would be, right? Because cactus is similarly, they don't senesce, do they? They're always green.
Prickly pear, yeah, it's always green. At least here in Texas. I don't know if there's a different species, but something similar to that is.
It should be the same also in Africa, but normally eaten by giraffes and the browsers, the goats. Yeah, and it's a big problem around. Like EPH is not far from these areas, so it's I think I'm trying to get the point from Kilabogi where she mentioned in arid, semi-arid areas, it's like a target. And whenever there's a lot of rainfall, it comes, and it comes as a blessing, and both ways.
Is it this Opuntia species? Or I've seen it also, and I saw people using it as a fence. So I think it's really easy. You chop off one bit and you put it in the soil, and it starts growing. So yeah, it depends on how dense this grows, if you can find this in the satellite data, because in general I think it's quite a bit smaller, or a linear feature if you use it as a fence.
So not as easy to detect. So Tim, one of the things that we're interested in is maybe making a Jupyter Notebooks Open Data Cube version of what you're down to see if we can duplicate what you're doing. What software platform did you use for doing your analysis?
I was using R mainly.
I see.
So not Python, but I guess it must be transferable. Or I'm not a very good programmer, so I have to be upfront about
something
that.
You would be interested in working with us on, because I think it'd be very interesting to repeat the same analysis in the Digital Earth Africa notebooks environment.
Yeah, I think I can definitely help with setting up the workflow, the different steps that yeah, we applied to get to the end result. So yeah, I think I would be interested to help you there.
Brian, maybe we can talk to Camp Android later, and if Mohammed is interested, maybe we can make this one of the next use cases.
Mohammed is very interested, just as a follow-up. He's very much interested, and thanks to the support from the team, and also he's very much happy with the work team has done. So I think at the end of any research is how you can connect other guys in the same field, other guys doing similar stuff. And if we are successful with Mohammed, then Kilabogi will have something for Botswana. So it's here to help everybody.
So I have a more general question. What is done about Prosopis? I mean, I guess the tree is useful in some things, like the sand dunes. Like, are people still planting this? Like, do people cut this down and burn it, or is this just this problem that there's nothing to do about?
So I can only say from my experience, but maybe people on the field they have other observations. But I've seen in Baringo there's a power plant that runs or should run on Prosopis pellets. So the idea was to harvest the Prosopis and then burn it and produce energy, but that never really took off. Yeah, I know in South Africa they're really the furthest in trying to combat the invasion. So they have a program where they're using an insect that makes the seeds infertile. So these kind of things, but it's
I had one of these things in Texas. It's called mesquite, I believe, and I didn't know what it was. One day there was this little tree in my backyard. I'm like, oh, it's an inconveniently located tree on my on the path to my house, but it's a tree. I'm not going to touch it. And like before I knew it, it was taller than the house and like this thick and thorny. I'm like, well, what is this thing?
Yes, in Botswana it's also people are also allergic to, I don't know if it's the flower or something, especially when it comes to the town areas. When there's a town where it's kind of a nuisance. Most people, they wouldn't want to live there because they get irritated by I don't know, what is it? Is it the pollen from that flower? So it's not necessarily also invasive, it's also affecting the people also.
Oh.
So it's quite a nuisance. People want it to be removed, and there was a project which was started by UNDP to actually produce energy, like you are saying, out of the plant, make some, I don't know if it's charcoal production, so that they can harvest the plant and use it for energy, like an energy source. But it's just at an experimental stage for now. It's not really effective. We can't say it's effective. So, and the coverage, like you're saying, the land cover, the amount of cover is not known. So it's just something that people want to control, but the spread in terms of land cover is not really known. And it's not being used, like you are saying, for feeding cattle or for cattle production, because our production is mainly for in the grassland. So it's actually affecting the grassland, is taking over the grassland in our country. So if they can do the control, I don't know if that is another option, then it probably will take some years also to actually control the whole thing, because they are using the physical control, not the biological control, like you are saying in South Africa, they are using the biological control. So it may be another option to use here.
Yes, indeed. I think the mechanical control is very difficult because it grows back so fast. And I've seen, I think it was in Somalia, where they just bulldozer the complete area, and in the end, like half a year later, it's again there. What I've seen that works is, yeah, basically you cut off the tree, and then immediately you have a very short window. You have to put some kind of a poison into the root system, and then you have a very good chance of killing it. But it's very labor intensive, so it's really difficult to get rid of it.
So
It doesn't have much economic value. Brian, don't we like barbecue with this in Texas?
yeah, we make very good barbecue with it in Texas. Yeah, nothing like slow roasting some beef brisket with some mesquite, but so it adds good flavor. I don't know. We find it quite annoying here as well. The I did want to kind of highlight something that's actually available on the sandbox that if I think Steve was working on the crop classification last time, and we pointed towards the scalable machine learning in the real world examples. So from the root directory going to the real world examples, and then the scalable machine learning. If you were going to attempt something like this for instance with like the Optunia, or and perhaps as we start to build out the Prosopis, these are good notebooks for data wrangling, inspecting your training data, and kind of going through each one of the steps for creating classification. There is also, I believe, in the real world examples, we have a maybe it's in the frequently used code for the random forest, but the scalable machine learning is actually almost a class in of itself, where you can go through each one of the 5 notebooks, and so how to use scikit-learn, and these are I think these would be very familiar Python uh, data science tools, but it kind of knits them together with the notebook environment and the data cube, and how to access the data in the data cube, and then use those classification tools on that. So if anybody's interested, Actually, that is actually a good question I just thought of, is that you mentioned that you used a segmentation model to kind of actually, I guess, separate out just groups of trees, I imagine, and then and then kind of classifying. Was it classifying each group of trees, or was it just to like lower the number of pixels total that you had to process, or what was the um, here, I'll stop sharing my screen if you would like to share a.
I don't have many slides to share on that on my computer.
Okay.
But yeah, so we did this segmentation. So we also used e-cognition and the more commercial solutions. So to grow regions based on a similar pixel values, I would say. So of course, you have only your information in your bands. You grow a region based on similar characteristics. So you end up with like a nice field boundary, like patches of forest which look very similar, and then you classify those. So I think computationally it actually it's quite more demanding than just classifying
I see.
pixels. So it did not speed up things, but usually the approach when used with very high resolution data should yield better results.
So because of time, I wish to be the bearer of the best news that at least we can wind up right now. And we've seen many opportunities like what Brian can do in the next steps, or everyone can work together. First and foremost is to thank you very much, team, for this great presentation and the time you've provided for us. It's really valuable. It's just that we wish we could visit you in Austria to actually sit on your desk to see how things are going. But due to the pandemic, we respect everything the way it is, and we'll be able to reach out to you soon. Mine is again to thank you, and if you could share with the PDF with us in our next communication, I'll be able to share with everybody here so that we can create more interest in the kind of work you're doing. And actually, even from your presentation, we've realized there's some things we can actually work among ourselves and different persons. This is really great work, and we thank you and keep well.